So, hi everyone, and welcome back to Leading with GenAI. It's just me and Geoff today. Rob's actually sick. We wish him a speedy recovery, and he'll be back next time. But we've got an interesting agenda for discussion today, so we're going to jump straight in. Actually, Geoff's doing a lot of work in across the legal industry with generative AI or AI, and he's got some perspective. So we're going to riff on that to start with.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Pat. Yeah, it's some of this stuff with legal. I guess there's sort of two things, which is that for the law firms themselves, just these kind of using it in everyday tasks is just absolutely phenomenal. And there's some great work I've been doing recently with legal firms. So, most lawyers, they spend far too much of their time, and they would say this themselves, far too much of their time just doing mind-numbingly boring tasks like recording minutes of meetings and that kind of stuff. And it's all essential. It's all, and there's good regulatory reasons behind it as well, why they have to do it. Or things like they have to go and get a load of information together from various sources, consolidate that into a short summary of a matter that they have to send to a client. They need to bring together lots of information from various different places, put it into a standard form of a document. And I'm sure, Pat, you'll think, well, I'm thinking as you hear this go, well, those are all just fantastic use cases for generative AI, for large language models and AI assistants. And this is just amazing when you look at all of this kind of stuff. So some of the work I've been doing with these law firms is as they start using it, they're like, this is just going to save me so much time. Which is really, really interesting. And then you sort of go, well, and I remember saying this to the managing partner of a law firm, that are you really interested in saving time because obviously you bill the clients? He said, well, we don't feel good about billing clients for mundane admin type tasks. We have to because time is money, effectively. That's what we do. He said, but actually there's a lot of stuff where there's leakage where we just don't bill the client because if it's just tidying stuff up and recording some minutes or something, we often won't do it. We won't bill them for it. And he said, and I also know that, particularly if it's a client you know really well, you don't necessarily minute every single meeting, even though you probably should, because you kind of know you're okay with that client and that sort of thing. So there's lots of stuff like that where we probably should do things, we don't necessarily do it. And he said, so actually, we're really excited about doing this. And the other thing he was really interested in as well was the fact that it allows them to move towards, much higher value services for clients where you can do fixed fee billing. And also for the legal sector, just opening up this idea that there's lots of people out there who don't take advantage of legal services because they don't think they can afford it. And by using generative AI and these AI assistants, it's going to allow lawyers to be much more efficient, therefore offer services, legal services at a lower price point, which means more people get to take advantage of it. So, there we go. There's a big brain dump of all the stuff I'm working on, but really, really interesting. And I think in summary, the use of an AI assistant like a Microsoft Copilot, a ChatGPT, whichever one it is really going to help transform the legal sector. And I think it's probably one of the simplest and easiest set of use cases I've seen to go and implement and get value from straight away.
Yeah. So do you think you already said that there'd be some kind of shifts in terms of the price point and pressure on that probably, but do you think there'll also be, as they automate more and more of the kind of manual activity, maybe agents also come into the play in a year or so? Will that mean they will pivot to more success fees? Because there's less risk in what they're doing. Maybe they can simulate even some of the cases that they're working on and stuff like that. That'd be interesting to.
That's a really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of success fees, I guess what that does is allows them to take a lot of the cost out of the sort of more admin type tasks of preparing things, researching, all of those kind of things as well. Yeah, because actually there's a good point, is it? If you're success fee, so that sounds like something which involves litigation, going to court, that kind of stuff, or successfully recovering something or a successful outcome by negotiation. That will be, you'd assume there'll be some investigations and some research that needs to go into that to find out case law and so on. Tools like Perplexity, for example, and other search tools, which we'll talk about a bit later, are ideal for using in that sort of stuff, is to go and find some case law and that kind of stuff. And if actually, I was actually looking at something just the other day where we were looking at a decision that had gone before the European Court of Human Rights, and actually ChatGPT did a pretty good job of summarising the types of cases and what sort of things the European Court of Human Rights will actually rule on and that kind of stuff. So from a research perspective, there's all of that sort of stuff that's in there as well. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that will kind of help with success fees. And then automation. Now this is really interesting because there's quite a lot of legal services, so things like will writing, for example. Now here in the UK, will writing is an unregulated business, which is why you can go and buy a paper, fill it out yourself, will from off the shelf in a supermarket or something. But will writing is a really easy one to automate in many ways because it's unregulated, so it doesn't need such a high level of attention on there. But lots of law firms do it, and they do it as a loss leader to build client relationships. But actually recognise that what they're up against is these kind of sort of free or very low cost legal will writing services. So from an automation perspective, what have you got to do? Well, you've just got to take the client on a journey that says, what is it you want to do? Who do you want to benefit from your estate, when you pass? And it's a standard set of questions that you'd ask. And for most people, it's probably pretty straightforward, isn't it? They just want it written down. I'm going to leave everything to my kids. It's going to be divvied up 50-50, apart from, the antique crockery, which is going to go to my daughter, and the vintage car goes to the son or something like that. They kind of know what they want, and you could take them through an automated process where they fill out a series of forms that gets picked up and dropped into a standard document, which they can then review and go, yeah, I'm happy with that, and then they sign it. And you could actually do the entire thing without having a lawyer involved at all. You kind of get a bit of a rubber stamp on it from your law firm, but it helps you build that relationship so you can, you might be able to build a relationship with that client. Now, interestingly, from a tech perspective, this is ideal for tools like Microsoft's Copilot, is you could build a custom Copilot to do exactly this kind of thing, perhaps. It's all built with Power Automate behind the scenes and Power Apps, so you could easily have a nice little workflow that would take somebody through it. So, and that's just one example. I also think, there could be, we haven't yet scratched much more than the surface of what GPTs will do and custom co-pilots and gems in Google and that kind of thing. But you can absolutely imagine that in the same way you've got an app store experience for Android and iOS, that you could have the same kind of thing within ChatGPT, for example, where ordinary people go, I need to write a will. So they go and access a GPT from OpenAI, and it's in a GPT store, and then they find a local law firm who's got a GPT for it, and it takes them through a little journey and spits out a Word document. At the end, they print it and sign it.
Yeah. And so that's kind of around law firms, but then there's this whole corporate opportunity, and we've got these vertical kind of applications like Harvey that are beginning to appear, and you've got the big consultancies, probably the big four, playing around with that. But one interesting use case is last 4 years I was leading a team of about 50 consultants, project managers, building consortia across the EU around R&D funding, and that required some of these projects. We had up to 50 partners from research, corporate, SME, all over Europe, all in the same project consortia. And that required commercial agreements and NDA agreements between all of the different parties, and we had to kind of coordinate all this kind of stuff. And that put an awful lot of pressure on the chief legal officer, and a lot of, sometimes I had to get involved in T's and C's and checking them and negotiating stuff like that. So I think that in corporates and in smaller companies as well and startups, there's going to be huge workflow opportunity around legal.
Yeah, I completely agree, Pat. I think it's really, really interesting, and there's quite a few people I've had discussions around this with recently for that internal use case. So, for example, as you say, internal legal departments are always overstretched, and there's too much demand for the time. And of course, the business is always coming to them, go, but this is really, really important. I need this done. I've got to have it reviewed now. We've got to get it signed. And some of the agreements are really important and do need review, and some don't. I remember my time working for Barclays. When we incepted a project, we used to have there was a spreadsheet that was sent round, and you had to answer a series of questions in there, and it did a calculation as to whether your project was high risk or not. And it was looking at things like regulatory and all of this kind of stuff as to what were you doing? Were you handling personally identifiable data? Did it touch on regulatory issues and so on and so on and so on? And if it gave you a ranking of high, then you had to go and engage a risk team, and they'd come and spend some time with you to understand what your project was doing. And there's a very similar thing I think you can do with legal agreements. So I can imagine, if I go back to my time working in big organizations, that if I've got an NDA that somebody's asking me to sign, if I've got a license agreement that's we need to buy this software or start using this SaaS platform, and I've got a license agreement there, what I do is I've got my corporate GPT, custom Copilot, whatever that is, and I basically point it at that website terms and conditions, and get it to review it. I upload the document with the NDA in there, and the standardized GPT Copilot that's been built by our group legal reviews the document and looks for things we know we need to care about and gives me a ranking. Yeah, and it then tells me, and it could, with a bit of automation behind the scenes, then trigger a workflow to say to legal, this has been reviewed and it's come up as a high. You need to get involved. Yeah. Whereas, otherwise, and so on. And you could build some. You can think about some kind of workflows you could build around that whole thing. So you're basically saying, you move group legal on from being a blocker to being an enabler, which is what they'd like to see themselves as, to basically say, look, guys, what are you going to do? If you need to touch anything on legal, you could review documents through this process, and that very quickly will give you a rubber stamp to say, yep, off you go, keep going, no problem. Go back to the supplier and tell them we don't sign up to these kind of terms, and here's some suggestions. Because that's the other thing you do with the GPT or the Copilot, is you could get it to suggest alternative wordings. We would never agree to these kind of terms, but here's an idea of what we would agree to. And then if they, that individual project manager, whoever it is, then passes that information back to the other side and said, look, I've had this from our group legal, and they basically say we never sign up to these terms, but here's a steer as to what we might do. Then you've moved a step forward in the process without ever actually having to have involved an individual from group legal itself. So I think there's some brilliant ideas on that, isn't it?
Yeah. So essentially, what we're talking about here is almost touching almost every function in a business, because you've got legal implications on people running projects, on sales, on distribution, partnerships, people doing R&D with external partners, things like that, M&A, all kinds of things. So I think there's definitely something going to be watching, and you are focused a lot on this in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, well, not just the UK, but globally is the legal sector. I mean, it's just phenomenal. All of these different use cases. So my prediction would be within the next couple of years, every single legal department and law firm will be using some sort of generative AI in the shape of an AI assistant. And as part of that, they will be using things like Google Gems, custom GPTs, and custom Copilots, and all part of a sort of agentic type workflow that will be in there as well.
Right. And those that aren't are probably still using inkwells and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I did actually. There is one law firm that I've been working with, and there are lawyers there who go into meetings and they handwrite out the minutes from the meeting, and they give it to a secretary who then types it up and puts it into the case management system.
Wonderful.
And they were quite taken aback when I showed them how, in using Microsoft Teams, you could transcribe a meeting and then ask Teams Copilot to summarize it into a set of bullet points, and they were like, "Whoa!" It was like I just showed them some magic.
Yeah, and then of course you've got the international translation capabilities as well. So on top of that, we'll come back to you, Geoff, in a couple of years after episode 150 and checking on that.
And actually, Pat, we should definitely pick up on that translation thing in a couple of weeks' time when the new voice stuff in GPT, ChatGPT, has been rolled out, because I'm super excited by this real-time translation thing.
Yeah, let's put that on the docket for next time if we get it, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Next up, we were going to talk about GPT search, and this is really OpenAI's moving into the search industry, and you've got some strong opinions and thoughts on this.
I'm never short of an opinion, Pat. You know me. So I think this is really, really interesting, right? Because I think search within an AI assistant, and of course, not all of them do it. You know, Claude, for example, doesn't have connectivity to the internet, which I think is a real blind spot for that tool, because it's a brilliant LLM and an AI assistant, Anthropic's Claude, but it doesn't connect to the internet. It can't browse the web. But that was one of those changes that when OpenAI put that into ChatGPT, and it's not just in ChatGPT, it's in Microsoft Copilot. I'm pretty sure Gemini does it as well. That was just another move on, because you always had this cutoff date, didn't you? It's the training date of when it was up to date on. And of course, if you think about what the AI system does, it is absolutely brilliant at summarizing text. That's one of the great things these large language models do. So to hook it up to the internet all made perfect sense. So I totally get this idea that the future of search isn't going to be going to your web browser and going into going to Google, Bing, whatever search engine you use and search for stuff. You're just going to do it from within the AI assistant and ask it to summarize it for you, which will be much better rather than having to wade through pages trying to find something how to do it. And I do it all the time. All the time, I'm always going, refer to current sources, go look for this and get it to summarize it in ChatGPT, for example. But the thing I was thinking of with this is, I think I don't understand really how the whole business model works, right? Because the thing with search, what makes Google search work is that there's this kind of unwritten contract, isn't there? Which basically says, for me as my business, I'm happy for Google to come and trawl my website, index all the pages, and then serve that up in a search. Yeah. And we play this game, which basically says you can have access to my content, Google, because the chances are if somebody's searching and I've hit the right SEO keywords, we play this SEO game, I've hit the right SEO keywords, I'm going to appear on the first page of search. Someone's going to click on the link and land on my website. I then get that traffic, and then it's my job, when I've landed that traffic onto my website, to then either convert them to a lead, I manage that bounce rate. That's that key metric you're looking for. Is they don't just look at that one page and bounce off. They'll look at multiple pages, so on and so on. And this is what marketers specialize in and do a really great job. So that's that unwritten contract, and that's why I'm happy for Google to come and index my site. But suddenly, if that disappears, and of course I can actually turbocharge that if I want to get further up the rankings, I just pay Google for the keywords, and that's the whole Google business with the paid advertising and keywords. So there's that kind of model works really well. I produce content because I should get this benefit from it. But if I produce content and it's going to get indexed and searched and surfaced in an AI assistant and summarized, and yes, it might have some little marks on the screen with a link so the user could click through, but they're probably not so likely because they've got a summarized version. They don't need to come and read my blog about topic X because ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, has neatly summarized it for them. So there's going to be a huge reduction in the click-through. So why would I now be interested in letting those guys come and monetize? Because ChatGPT is taking money from its Plus users. Why would I allow them to come through and monetize my content effectively? And I think this is why you've seen Condé Nast send this cease and desist letter to Perplexity to say, you can't just serve our content up, because particularly for somebody like Condé Nast with all their different publications, what they want you to do, they want to land you on their site and convert you to a paid subscriber. They want to, they've got advertising running on their site as well. They want eyeballs on their pages and eyeballs on their adverts. And if that's appearing in a Perplexity search result, they don't get the advertiser eyeballs and they don't get the click-throughs and all of that kind of good stuff that comes through it. So, in summary, whilst I totally get the use case, and from a user perspective, I absolutely agree this is the right way to go, I just don't really understand at the moment how the current model is going to support that.
And does it mean that, is there a possibility that the search could get, or the GPT search could get corrupted? It could hallucinate, for example. And I'm not asking you to answer that yet, I'm just throwing out there. But the other thing is, how would they then start diving into the advertising business in order to fund it? And make some revenue out
Yeah,
of it.
I mean, I think the thing is that something's got to change. The way that ChatGPT, for example, will surface the results of a web search it's done right now. I can't see that's a sustainable model. So something has to change there, and maybe it's in ChatGPT, Google Gemini, whatever. There's a like the artifacts panel that you get in Claude now, which is a really neat feature they put in. There's a sidebar that shows you the websites it's surfaced it from, so you're more inclined to click through, because that's the bit that's got to work, right? Is if you're going to use ChatGPT as your default search console, so to speak, there's got to be an incentive to click through to the website that the results have come from. Otherwise, that person is not going to allow that to do. So something's got to change around the model. I don't think it's an unsolvable problem. We as an industry have solved many problems, and we'll probably solve this one as well. But I think at the moment, the assumption that all websites are just going to allow ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on, just to trawl their websites and serve that information up summarized. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, and then if you've got you bring Llama into the mix, and you've got people spinning up their own, models and everything, and maybe the ability to actually insert some kind of search function in those models as well, then everyone's going to be crawling everyone.
So, yeah, exactly. And then what happens is the crawlers then get blocked pretty quickly, don't they? It's that there's I know it can be overridden, but you've got those. The file you can put there just to say what can and can't be crawled, to tell the crawlers not to go in there. But that's an optional thing. But you could then see maybe there's a web filtering level. The known crawlers get blocked from trawling people's websites. And the only way that you can find content on the internet is to go through a traditional search engine. I think we'll solve this problem, but I think at the moment that's a question that needs to be answered.
Okay, something to keep an eye on anyway, as it kind of pans out over the next few months. Hey, the next thing that was on our agenda for the day really was around these market corrections, around the big tech and how the share price is going up and down. And disclosure, I mean, I've been a NVIDIA shareholder for quite a few years now. I don't really pay much attention to it, but what I am interested in
you must be a multimillionaire now, but
no, we'll go into that in another session. But I basically started moving stuff around some time ago, and I probably didn't do myself any favors when I sold off some NVIDIA a couple of years ago, but that's another story. But what interests me is the fact that me as a user, we're all beneficiaries of all of this infrastructure that's being laid down and invested in. So, while there's this huge discussion at the top around, are they going to get back the money that they're invested in, the capex they're invested in? There are hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world who are actually gaining tremendous benefits from all of the investments that they're making. So that's kind of where I sit. I don't know what your opinion is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the what was interesting, right, was that I saw Microsoft's results came out, and the analysts weren't over the moon about it because they weren't generating enough return on investment for the sheer amount of money they've put into things like AI. But actually, if you looked at it fundamentally, Microsoft's numbers are still really good. And I always think, this is the problem with being a public company is actually, I'm sure I saw they did a 30% year-on-year growth on Azure, but it wasn't good enough. It's like, wow, I mean, that's pretty damn impressive, isn't it? I guess the thing is that the analysts and the investors want to see a faster return on investment in AI. I think it's taking longer than everybody thought it would. And I've heard anecdotally from people I know who are big Microsoft partners that Microsoft is disappointed in the take-up so far of Copilot. And there's sort of M365 Copilot, because of course Microsoft's got many Copilots. And I think there's two reasons behind that, which is that firstly, Microsoft Copilot as a tech from a usability perspective, I just don't think it's there yet. I think it's really, really frustrating experience. When you've used probably ChatGPT, which is probably the leading from not just a model perspective, but from a user experience perspective. There's so many things it does really well, particularly 4.0 has really moved the bar up another level. There's stuff you would expect Copilot to be able to do that doesn't. So if you try and use Copilot in Outlook, you're like, why can't you do that? And it's really, really frustrating. If you ask it to go and summarize, I'll find, like, do advanced search to go and find the latest conversation you have with somebody, it sort of struggles to do it, and it's quite frustrating. It feels to me like Copilot within Word, Excel, especially PowerPoint as well, it's kind of a beta, and it's an early beta. There's lots of stuff it says I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm actually going to cancel my subscription. I've been pretty disappointed with it. I can just make use with ChatGPT, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and I'm not surprised to hear that, Pat. I'm not surprised at all. I think some of the stuff it does do really well is meeting summarization. So if you are one of those people who spends a lot of time on Teams, come back to this point about lawyers, if you are a lawyer and you recorded, and particularly use Teams phone, you record every single call and you summarize it, that's a huge win for you. So that will make sense, that $30 a month per user. It's an easy win. But yeah, I think it in the Office app. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's had a slower kind of take up than people expect as well. The other thing is, there's a general sort of theme in the AI space. I'd be interested in your thought on this, Pat, which I see, and it still surprises me, is people seem to be divided into one of two camps, and there's a huge split between the two. Either you've drunk the Kool-Aid, like you and I have, and you go, I would never do anything other than use a ChatGPT or whatever tool I'm using. An AI assistant is now part of my daily workflow. Yeah. Just before we started recording this podcast, I just quickly wanted to fact check something we've spoken about. So I actually started doing a Google search. I don't need to do this. I went to ChatGPT and went, summarize this latest bit of information for me. That's the kind of thing when you use it daily just to speed up all your tasks. So, people like you and I have drunk that Kool-Aid. We'd never go back. That's what we do. And it still surprises me when I go and meet people who go, oh, yeah, but it hallucinates. Oh, it doesn't do this, or it can't do that. And they'll tell you all the reasons not to do it, or they just don't get it. They just haven't seen the light at all. And people really seem to go into one of those two camps. So I think it's going to take a bit longer to get that traction going, to get people using these tools. But I suspect once it starts happening, it's going to snowball, and people will never go back. And you just need to get the people using it. And once they start doing that and they start getting it into their daily workflows, then it will just take off. So probably it's one of those things, like many things in technology, it takes longer than everybody think it does to get started.
Yeah, or there's a lot of usage that isn't actually bubbling up. So I saw a really good podcast a couple of days ago with Harry Stebbings on his 20VC podcast, together with Ethan Mollick. And they were talking about, a lot of this kind of shadow usage where employees in large companies, they don't want to talk about the productivity savings that they're finding because they are worried about the reactions that the bosses, the management might have to that in terms of pulling a trigger on job cuts or whatever. And this is creating all kinds of strange situations. So I actually think that there's more usage of it. I mean, obviously the people at OpenAI or the other model providers, they understand how much these models are being used, but maybe they don't understand the implications of how it's actually affecting workflows within business operations.
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting point you're making, Pat, because I'm from my background working in cloud migration. I remember the early days of cloud, going back to the 2010, through 2015, probably. There was a lot of shadow IT went on where people had got their credit cards and their personal credit card, they'd sign up for an Amazon account or whatever and just started using it. And then they fessed up to it eventually. And then there was this big mop up where people went around and went, yes, it's fine. You can do it now, but you've got to do it securely, bring it over here. And they'd use their corporate cards in some cases and this kind of stuff. So they then provided a secure AWS environment to allow developers to carry on using it, this kind of thing. So we saw loads of that happen. I think the slight difference here is that people always feel like they've got some cheat codes, don't they? And they feel like they've got the edge over their colleagues. they've got the edge over, another team or another country unit or something like that. And they don't really want to admit that actually all the emails they sent last week, they generated them using ChatGPT, and that saved them a ton of time, and they went and played golf early or something like that. I kind of think there's definitely something like that that's going on. Is people don't really want to admit it because it feels like it's cheating. So you kind of need to get this sort of authorized cheating. And one of the things that I do, the work I do with clients to roll out generative AI, is basically say you need this top-down, bottom-up approach. So you need to say you've got a steering group that sets out, here's your AI policy, here's an AI acceptable use policy, here's tools you can use, and we're going to provide those as an organization. But you can't mandate how people are going to use them. You've got to give them guidance and so on. And then the user group is your bottom up, where you want to get out there, get the tools into the hands of those people, get them starting to use it, get your change champions of whatever term it is you want to use within those teams across your organizations, get those guys using it and sharing that information. And then suddenly the whole thing snowballs and takes off at great pace. So back to this point about Microsoft and the rest of the tech community and their share prices, I think you'll start to see that snowball effect as more people start using it, particularly in large organizations. Then the license counts will go up for Google Gemini, for Microsoft Copilot, and so on. Across those orgs. One note on that though is I think it was yesterday, so we're recording this on a Friday. On Thursday, 1st of August, they Meta announced their results, and their results are doing all right actually on there. Their advertising's up, and I think one of the interesting points there with Meta's results is that there was something about the way that Apple had sort of hobbled their business model by preventing Meta and Facebook from seeing certain types of data about users. And they've managed to get a way around it now. And they've used AI successfully themselves to help generate much more targeted advertising and all of those kind of things. And so although it's not llama, so to speak, it's actually Meta's use of AI to then go and generate revenues, I think was one of the really interesting points. And they've got, I think I saw Meta is at least 20% year-on-year growth in revenue, or quarter-on-quarter growth in revenue, which is phenomenal when you think 20% on billions of dollars worth of revenue.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that capex is also spent on energy provision as well and infrastructure, because these data centers and chips are sucking up so much juice.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a subject probably for another time, because that's a big subject on it in its own right, isn't it? Is it even sustainable that we could actually carry on using the current type of technologies with NVIDIA GPUs, which are very power hungry, produce tons of heat and all this kind of thing?
Yeah, and you think about how many, it's just a couple of watts that actually are required to fire up the brain.
Yeah,
that's another different subject as well.
Well, we should probably have a conversation, because there was a talk I was at last week where Daniel Hume, who's the chief AI officer from WPP, was talking about neuromorphic computing and about how that advanced, where you could get advanced AI algorithms to use a similar kind of level of power to the human brain.
Yeah, I just want a quick segue, and that is you mentioned a minute ago about how people maybe want to hide the fact that they're using some of these generative AI tools in workflows. But I actually sometimes get this reverse guilt where, like yesterday, I published this blog about funding in the EU on LinkedIn, and I wrote it all myself. I didn't use any assistance. And then afterwards, I was thinking, I really hope people don't think I use ChatGPT for this. This is authentic.
Yeah, do you know what? I bet they do. I bet they think that. I mean, personally, when I'm writing blogs, I kind of do a bit of a hybrid approach, right? I use it as a thought partner to go, I'm thinking of writing a blog about this. What would make a good subject? Help. And I riff back and forth. And I think that's one of the next level things you can start to do with your tools like your ChatGPTs and Copilots, is when you have a conversation with it. And I always say this to people, don't just put a prompt in and take the first response out. Have a conversation back and forth. Think this through step by step is a classic prompt line you want to use these days. Get it to do that. And then, you can actually, you can chain this prompting together to say, do this, write it, then review what you've written, and then correct it, and then walk away, make a cup of tea, come back, and of course it will have finished by the time you get back. And then you've got that improvement. But actually, Pat, I think it's a nice one to talk on. Is even if you wrote something from scratch, you would get an editor's review. So why not use ChatGPT as your editor to review it for you and comment and help you improve your work?
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
Trouble is, I've already published it.
One
more thing.
One of my favorite things is the thing out of Star Wars, isn't it, about Han's shot first, which is the scene that George Lucas went back and spent millions of dollars and did about 3 or 4 changes to, because he was never quite happy about whether Han Solo shot the bounty hunter first or shot the other guy first, and this kind of stuff. And so I'm a great believer that you could just keep fiddling around with this. In fact, in some of my companies, this has been known as when Geoff talks about George Lucasing something, that's what I'm referring to. Is we just keep fiddling with it rather than finish it off.
Yeah, got it. Hey, I just want to pick up on one more thing that you mentioned, and that was around how you get some people who are negative on use of generative AI. They'll take one specific thing, they'll say, it's hallucinated here, and then they'll generalize across the whole kind of landscape. Well, I had one of those individuals who was slightly kind of negative about the use of, or the opportunity around generative AI in their organization. And what I did was I did a live demo, and I said, okay, do you have any videos of yourself on YouTube? And he said yes. So we went, I went into YouTube and I copied the link to it, and then I went back into ChatGPT, pulled up the GPT video summarizer, dropped in the link to his video, and said, please tell me top 10 insights from this video. Boom, straight on the screen. And then I took that and then I put it into the other GPT called Whimsical to create a mind map of what he was talking about. And then I started moving around online, and you could just see his mouth drop. And then
the Kool-Aid went in intravenously. Yeah,
exactly. And the others were kind of laughing. And then I said, how many YouTube videos do you have for your company on your channel? I don't know. So we went in, had a look, and there was about 7,500 videos. I said, what do you think the content value of all of that data and insight is to you, to your people? It takes 10 seconds to get that and to manipulate it and to maybe repurpose it in some way. And by the way, your customers and your partners can also do that as well. So that was kind of one way of navigating around this negative issue and using a bit of online magic to actually get them back on side.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and that comes back to I love that as an example. Is when and I always do this when I run AI workshops, is to give people live demos to show you this is the kind of things it can do. And the obvious one is you use ChatGPT or Claude or something just to show them, here's how you could generate bits of code in Claude, and it's very good at it, and it will probably generate better code than you can yourself. But and they start to see that and go, wow, okay, no, that really is quite something. And I've built like chatbots based off an FAQ off somebody's website just to show them this is the art of possible, and this took me 20 minutes to create for you. And I like doing that just to show people. And I think when it's relevant, and what you've just said there, Pat, is it's it's not some separate example that you've just a canned example you put together. You took this guy's content and showed it to them. They go, oh my God, that's just incredible, isn't it? They have those kind of moments where the penny drops and they're like, oh wow, I can really see how I can do that. And I think you've hit on a really good point there, Pat, which is there's already all this incredible information that many companies have got. Not everybody's going to have 7,000 YouTube videos, but there's loads of information and knowledge built up within companies that they could go and mine now using generative AI and go through it and repurpose it for things. I think there was a blog I wrote a while ago. I think it was a blog, wasn't it? Yeah, that I did about when you finish a project in a large organization, you do like a lessons learned. And then the lessons learned report, if people actually do them, then just disappear and people forget about it. I could just see being able to share all of that corporate knowledge. So imagine if you had like there's a custom GPT, Copilot, whatever. If you're a project manager, when you incept your project, before you get given your funding, you need to go before the funding board committee, whatever it is, and demonstrate that you have reviewed lessons learned from all the other projects the company's ever run, and you've learned things from it. And I think, people would be sounds a bit of a yawn fest kind of thing, but actually imagine you've got an interactive experience, in Microsoft Corporate Copilot, for example, you're using it, so it's all nice and secure and all of this kind of stuff. And you've gone in and had a conversation about, I'm starting a project up to do this, and it can search through and find relevant projects and go, yeah, well, we did this one before, and this is what happened, and this is what the project managers are saying worked well, this is what didn't work well. Imagine all that learning you could get would fundamentally change how you go about incepting projects.
Yeah, exactly. Or like if you're a sales operation, you, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the month, all of those deals that you lost, that data might be tagged somehow in the CRM system. You just take it out, dump it into ChatGPT, and then you start going through this kind of autopsy on
brilliant.
it. Yeah.
Lovely, brilliant use case. And actually then, one of the hardest things to incentivize salespeople to do is write flipping notes up properly and store them in CRMs, right? But actually when you've got an incentive to do that, and you can get all that learning, and also there's the deals we lost, deals we won, and then it summarizes that. And you could absolutely do that. Is at your start a quarter kickoff is you could go in there and using the large language models to basically be saying, okay, let's do the quarter review, and this is what our findings are. These messages have been landing really well with clients. These ones haven't been landing so well. These products right now seem to be working well. Brilliant use case. Love it.
And it can be verbal, of course, can't it? So, and if you're international organization, you got people in different languages, dumping those verbal descriptions of what went wrong into the system, then you can analyze all of that. So
for sure. I think that's a subject for another day. We should definitely cover this. We're doing some work out in the Netherlands recently, and they gave us loads of documents written in Dutch. And of course, I do not speak a word of Dutch at all, but just being able to do instant translation has been phenomenal through all of those kind of things. And of course, the Dutch have got phenomenal English language levels, but quite understandably, there's loads of their internal documents all written in Dutch, and it's just been brilliant being able to translate all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What about double
anyway,
Dutch?
Let's talk about that another time. And I know Rob will want to have a chat about this as well.
Sure. The last thing we were going to touch on was your Brighton AI lab that you wanted to mention, and let's have a discussion about it.
So basically, look, we talked about it. For you and me, Pat, we drank the Kool-Aid, right? We love ChatGPT and all these kind of tools. That, I always said it doesn't matter which one you want to use, but just use one of them. Something that really strikes me is that there's a whole load of people out there who don't even really know what these tools are. I was talking to a surveyor the other day who went, chat what? And he honestly had no idea. He's probably, I would say, mid to late 50s, no idea what ChatGPT was. And the two of us who were talking to him, it's nothing to do with it. It's outside the tech business, the social thing. And he was like, never heard of it. He's literally never heard of ChatGPT. And what I've got is a thing. So I have a thing with Pivotal Edge, which is the Everyday AI Academy. There's a series of videos, there's these webinars, record them, and it's all just, here's 3 things in under 30 minutes. Going to show you how to use one. I did one a couple of days ago on how to use ChatGPT as a legal assistant to give you answers and that kind of stuff. So the idea with the Everyday AI Academy, which is coming up, which is 12th of September. It's hosted online, so no matter where you are in the world, you can access that. We'll put a link in the show notes through to it, completely free. The idea is, if you're an ordinary person, you may not be a technologist, but here's how you can do simple things like you need to prepare for a job interview. Right, here's how tools like ChatGPT and so on can help you do that. Maybe I don't know, you rent a property, you need to understand your tenancy agreement. Most ordinary people have not got a chance of understanding what's properly in a tenancy agreement, and they want to know, how do I serve notice and move out and that kind of stuff. And you and I, Pat, know that's a real obvious use case to feed that into an AI assistant. I'm just going to take people through that. And my aim here is to get as many people as possible using these technologies, because I passionately believe we're in a great age of the democratization of technology. Everybody has access to this. All you need is a smartphone, a tablet. You don't even need a computer. You could, if you need to, go down to your local library. If you live here in the UK, there's free access to computers. and you can use this technology, and it's completely free. You don't even need to sign up these days to use ChatGPT and Claude and so on. So, I passionately believe we need to get as many people as possible benefiting from these technologies, and that's the idea of the Everyday AI Academy, is to get as many people as possible on board.
Brilliant. We'll get the link. We'll get the link over to me. I'll put it in the show notes, and we'll give you some help promoting that as well on LinkedIn and other places.
Yeah.
So look forward to it.
Fantastic.
Great. Hey, Geoff, thanks for your time and insights today. It's always a pleasure riffing back and forth with you. Rob's hopefully going to be back next time. To our audience members, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. And we'll be back in the next week with another podcast episode of Leading with GenAI. So from me, Pat, and from Geoff, thanks a lot.
Great stuff. Thank you.